Okay, well, first of all, thanks everybody for attending this with this Zoom approach. You never know if nobody shows up, and I'm really pleased that there's a good group of people interested. And so Steve Petruzza, I'm not sure if Giorgio managed to connect, and I are going to present a simple kind of cheap approach to publish large amount of data. And so we would like to organize this presentation kind of as a mix of a demo and a few slides. We're going to go primarily through a main use case that we did during the pilot project. In particular, we helped the NEON project publishing their photography data taken from airplanes. So it's actually the larger amount of data. It goes in the hundreds of terabytes. And they were concerned that that would take them years to have anything interactive and so on. And fortunately, there was a good match, and we allowed them to make some of the data publish immediately. And later on, they will continue to adopt this technology to the larger scale. We'll mention at the end some application in more three-dimensional data. The basic technology is the same, but we figure we would focus on something a little bit more basic, but we can do some live demonstration. Again, everybody, please feel free to ask or type questions. I don't mind interruptions. And so we'll go from here. So this is a little bit bigger picture of the type of technology that we're going to talk about. This is one of the larger deployment. We had a collaboration with NASA where they collected very high resolution climate runs. Those are simulation runs, differently from the data collected by NEON, but they had a similar, in a way, worse problem, a data collection of about 3.5 terabytes. So obviously it was very hard to make it available and distribute it. So it was kind of technically available in the sense that the data was on a website that is open, but obviously downloading that much data and making any practical use, it's impractical. So they had previously only a set of pre-computed images, and in collaboration also with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, we created a mirror site with a cache of terabytes of space to mirror data from NASA. For practical reason, we could not put the server on their side. And then on the fly, we did conversion of the data, caching and sharing. And so we could, for the first time, they could allow people to do some analytics and visualize the data in real time instead of just having pre-canned images. I have a slide later showing how to access that type of data through a Jupyter notebook. So to give a sense of how one can work with the data and do analytics in real time. So generally, we're talking about creating an environment where the data can be streamed to a client and make sure that people can easily work with the data. So we're really heavily focused on usability and making sure that the data movements do not become a problem in terms of a time-consuming process. So there is an open source data format that is designed specifically for streaming on low-end resources. So no need to have a big server actually can be deployed on a programmable hard drive like a Synology box. And so if the data is stored in a format that is not streamable, we would have an on-demand conversion when there is a first request. So this is the idea of having a user make a request, potentially convert the data and put it in a cache, and then the streaming data server, if there is a media available, can stream and make the data accessible to a web viewer. And more recently, this is actually accessible so directly through Python. So we, in a way, virtualize the data as a URL, not as a file, so that you fetch the components directly. So you open the URL, and if the data is not local, automatically it's kind of transparent to the user, the data start to be transferred. An interesting use case that we had not too long ago was to enable scientists from the mechanical engineering department here to participate remotely. I guess this is particularly sensitive now with COVID, that many of the synchronous light sources and other experimental facilities are now easily accessible in person. And so often people send a sample and remotely they have to look at the results. And so instead of doing the typical, do all the experiments and just gather a bunch of hard drive and then you go home and look at the data later and hope that there were no mistakes in the process, we work with the scientists at Argon National Laboratory, install with Docker a server. That's what we would call an ephemeral installation. So we would just install it during the time of experiment and then clean up and remove everything after that. And many facilities prefer that instead of installing permanently any piece of software. And then during the acquisition, the data was transferred and it would be visualized live from the PI, so the professor here that needed the results. And so this was really improving their ability to access the data, and they were able to use the result of one experiment. So they ran the facility, say, for 3 or 4 days. And so that's a very expensive thing to do. And they can, on the fly, adjust based on the results of the previous shot. So going back to the NEON challenge, so they are collecting large amount of data, and their mission is really to share that with the community. So they collect data themselves, but they don't really do the science. And so for them, this is really a high priority aspect. Their only API was basically to do download of big archive in bulk. And in fact, the practical thing to do more often was to tell them, I need this data collection, and they would literally mail you a drive with all the data inside. For kind of one-dimensional data, they had this interface where they can show the signals and so on. So obviously they were aware that visualizing on the fly on a web interface the data is very important, so that people don't do the mistake and get the wrong piece of data, or if they need only a shorter interval, they can deal with that. But then when it was a matter of dealing with this massive amount of images, they would fly airplane, collect them, stitch them together. That was just not viable anymore. And so we help them kind of at 2 levels. So kind of one is to take the data and convert it in this format that is defined on purpose to get streamable access. for which we have a few different layers. And then looking at the different type of data, RGB data, hyperspectral, and things like that, and also combine with different layers. The goal is to later on showing layered on top of Google Earth or things like that. But in a way, this is the contrast would be kind of a cheap equivalent of a Google Earth instead of having to buy into this big infrastructure. Also, we have been looking at providing cloud solutions that are not expensive. Anybody who has worked with cloud knows that they are a little bit of a trick in the sense that they make easy to upload the data, but then in addition to the cost of storing the data, they make you pay anytime you do a transfer outside of the cloud. And so it was interesting to see, okay, can we steer away from, say, Amazon and use other storage like Wasabi? And it's a competitor that actually does not make you pay for data transfer and allow to kind of scale the approach and have predictable costs. So different approaches. So they initially have a set of R scripts. Our infrastructure, it's more well designed to use Python and Jupyter notebooks, but if needed, we can expand the API to include R. But anyway, the scripts were such that effectively all the transfer and modification of data would be effectively in just big bulk transactions, so kind of far from ideal. And so computing various aspects, and then there is kind of monthly updates of the data. And then, we need to build a workflow that can be executed periodically to get the data from the next flights. So the population database does not have to be totally real time, but the real time part is the access and use of the data. So we establish as a pilot a database here on the Utah side, and then enable the availability of the data set, and also develop a user interface so that, so an API, sorry, programmable interface so that the data can be acquired remotely through, for example, a viewer in JavaScript, but later also for data execution. So this is the basic portal. We have a user interface to make it simple, even when the data is accessed manually. I don't know, Steve, do you want to quickly show a demo for this now? I don't know if Steve dropped out.
Yeah, no, I was stuff were going full screen and I couldn't unmute. So yeah, I can show something about this and also connect to the Neon portal, what is live now.
So let me, okay, I'll stop sharing my screen and you share yours. I don't know if.
Yes. Desktop one.
So we developed this also for some people on the medical side. So we made it very simple so people that are not experienced can actually do it manually with drag and drop.
It is telling me that Zoom is recording and doesn't allow until I restart it. Let's see.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Good. So this is basically the Neon data portal, this is live actually. You can see directly a few of the data products that are using this technology, looking at AOP data viewer. I can actually copy paste this link in the chat if anyone wants to, and then I will go through some of the details.
Yeah, and I have some of the links also in a slide later, so that people can find it later.
So, for example, if I want to explore the this high resolution orthorectified camera imagery, the page that talks about how the data were collected also contains at the end a visualization section, and here you can see which when during the year and on which sites the acquisitions were done, and through the visualization interface you can actually explore interactively the photo mosaics. So those are composed by, of thousands of images. So these data sets go from 50 gigabytes to 300 and more for each time step. So
yeah, one small thing to highlight is that, as you can see, this is the Neon data portal. If you look at the web address, it's all their server. And here we simply have an iframe. So the imaging data is housed on our side, and we provided them with the JavaScript for this little iframe. And so that integrates perfectly in their website, so people would not know that is handled in a different location. So keeps the user experience completely uniform.
Yeah, this is exactly the iframe that we have hosted somewhere. If you see, it's a different URL, and that's what basically they are embedding in their pages. So this is kind of our testing site, and this is another different data product actually, which we could look at. It's the vegetation indices. In this case, those are not RGB images, but are multispectral data. So we have for vegetation indices for the different sites. And so the color is basically mapped to a range of to some value between 0 and 1. And there are different, in this case, different color maps that you could apply, or different fields, different indices in this case. So you have kind of a compact viewer in a page that can go through sites, through time steps. And of course, this solution will be evolved to embed for maps, overlays, and things like that. Probably Valerio will mention later a little bit. And just to show you how on the back end those things work, basically there is this data portal which is deployed. They could be deployed simply with the Docker container, and basically provide this web interface where you can add the data sets, import your images, and visualize the published data sets. This in particular is the work. I don't know if I'm going too far, from the University of Florida, which is using this technology to
want to show how easy to upload an image, or I don't know if you.
I don't have a data set now.
Oh, okay, I'm ambushing you. Sorry.
No. Yeah. No, I was not. I don't have a data set on this computer to test it really.
Okay.
But there are instructions to try. I can download the data sets if we want to.
I just wanted to give a sense that is
Yeah.
a simple drag and drop interface. So normally those things take quite a bit of manual labor. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can go back to it.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't have that.
Okay. Let me pick up the presentation where I left, and then you let me know when you want to do it.
Yeah. So I stopped sharing.
Okay. Let me go Zoom. Okay, and so yeah, in a few minutes we'll try and show how easy it is to upload the data. And again, being a Docker container, also running that on your local machine or on your local network, it's really a matter of a couple of commands, as long as you have a Docker installation. And this is the simple API for the configuration. So once the server has the data, there are very simple commands. So on the programmable side, you query remotely, and you can have a list of the data available. And as you can see, you have the specific URL that you can access the data with. And this is how the little iframe interact with the rest of the web page, so that the web page keep full control of how the data is being accessed and so on. And we have a couple of versions of this. This is kind of the HTTP API. So you make a simple request, go for products and so on. And also we have a lower level API from the server. So this is kind of the main model of you have a data portal, database with the data, and kind of a web viewer. And then it's a client make a query for data available from the data product. It will relay the request to a database, so we can do all the source of the data, let's say the original data from the Neon infrastructure. The information is repeated back, so we will know how much data is created and what needs to be transferred and so on to update the server. And so the database start to be, so the difference between the old database and the new database is being created. And then the new data after conversion can be streamed directly and queried directly, so that the user can see the data on the fly. So this is the example that Steve was showing at the moment. So you have this viewer, the full integration. And so here, we'll share later the slides. So you will find some of those links connecting to the server. Hopefully their server is up. You go here, and then you can find the data. Here they have different, couple of different years. And so this shows how their acquisitions are kind of non-uniform. They're flying airplanes a year different, so it cannot be completely identical. And you will find those links to similarly vegetation indices, and this is kind of the tracks of the data over time. And so here you see 3 different data sets over time. And so and as we move forward, there will be a more sophisticated interface, for example, as we change year to keep the same zoom level and so on. This kind of depends on what people require on the client side. So an interesting development was a group at the University of Florida. They are basically scientists that use the NEON data, they needed to apply machine learning to do counting of tree, tree in a certain region through machine learning. And so they took the same user interface and put that in their website and augmented the images. So we provided the way to do the additional layer. And see now those squares are the identification of the trees. As you see, they're actually doing a really good job. And they can share directly views and find a particular level of detail in a particular region. So if you find a region of interest, you can share the proper link. And so when you have a dialogue among scientists, that tends to be particularly useful. And here we have the link to the main project. You see, this is their separate website, and they do tree detection. Okay, their website is a bit slower, but you can see how, what is that?
Yeah.
And this is the area integrated with the prediction in their website. And so just to give a sense how easy and for them really just they needed the image with the additional layer was kind of not only cheap but also easy to do the augmentation of the data sets. So, oops, not sure what's happening here. So there are other developments in similar spaces where, for example, this is kind of something that NEON does separately when they fly, given their massive infrastructure, when they fly airplanes, the data acquisition is done completely with a different process, so we're not involved in that. But there are tools related also to this data streaming format that allows to actually put together the data itself and do the stitching and so on. And so this is kind of a simple example of collecting the data. This is data from drones and you see that the location of where the picture kind of on a Google map overlay. And so here just to show where it is coming from, the various locations and so on. And then loading the images, one can get a sense of how initially the data is not properly aligned. So let me see, I'll just move forward in the video. So let me see. So here you see how, oops, I have to go even further. Sorry. Yeah, so here you see how typically people fly and you get the data kind of, it's roughly there, you get that through GPS and so on. But obviously the details are not properly together. And so with a little bit of additional processing, I'm just skipping a little bit the video because this has the full time, but we're talking about here a video of 3 minutes, just in the middle of a presentation is not ideal. You see how things are stitched together and now all the alignment of the images, it's completely adjusted together. And so you go from many different images that you can take with the drone, and you can again use one of those cheap drones that are maybe $1,000 or so, unless you need the hyperspectral images, and maybe the camera costs more. And then you can get a high quality stitching together, data available, and so on. So without much of resources that can be executed like on a laptop. So some farmers are testing this, they go on the field and on the track on the farm, they do the stitching on the fly. And that's very helpful because instead of uploading on the cloud, it's impractical just because you don't have the internet connectivity, but they need to know if the flight went okay so they don't have to drive back after a day or two. So maybe we can go back to Steve and just show how easy it is to do the uploading of a data set on a portal.
Yes. So I did download the data set. So this was like the interface I was showing you before. And basically through this other set of tools, which are basically tools to import data, which could be, for example, a single large image or a stack of images. We have another integration with Box, which is not, for example, installed on this portal now, that could import from a link, from a Box folder link images. In our case, the dataset I downloaded and unpacked is basically a stack of medical image data, which look like this. This is a heart. And simply I can import this folder, let's call it 3. And so of course those are the images will be uploaded on the machine or where the data portal is installed in this case. They are 256 files, shouldn't take too long. Almost there. And those are JPEG files, but any image format will work. And so then the portal automatically detects what's the number of files with their size in the 3 coordinates, the data type, and suggests a location for it. And then you could just save those changes, and the conversion starts. You could have several conversion going on at the same time. You will have a log that you could access. Of course, this is too technical to go into what the log is, but for debugging, I'm trying to move the bar. And then when you explore or through the list of the data sets that are published by this data portal, you can go and look at the
what is the hard
let's see. It takes 1, 2, now it's up. This is the hard 3, it's the last one. This is a slice, for example, of the. I'm on a Wi-Fi connection, but
ouch.
Yeah, but I mean, beside demos, this. Let me go to a volume, but this is generally something that doesn't. Okay, slice.
So anyway, so just to see how, so this is the 3 data set. But as you saw now, it's very user-friendly. You may have noticed the interface, there isn't either a GUI with box, so you can just connect to a folder and things like that to make the upload process really simple. And so here you see that without any complicated process, you have a server and some images, and those are immediately available remotely. I guess actually you could just share with people the link to this just to show them this is
Yes.
actually on the web.
Let me get to a slide, so that might be easier
So
for it.
this one there was.
Let me go. I'll copy this link and send it to the.
Yeah, we put it in the chat.
Yeah, and the same link, I'll try to open it on my side. Should open that same data set at that same slice.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we want to go also, since you mentioned the stitching? Do we want to?
I showed the video, so let me go
Okay.
through the slides, and then if there is
Okay.
time, maybe while people ask questions, we'll
Okay.
run that live. Okay, so yeah, this kind of gives a sense of simplicity. Again, all the software is open source, so in terms of being a low-cost solution, you cannot go lower than that. So here, going back on some of the climate data, here we're showing a little bit of the programmability of the approach and also the efficiency. So on the right, you see a Jupyter notebook. I mean, the writing is tiny, but I think you can kind of spot that this is just a traditional Python script. And as a Jupyter notebook, you can actually then open a data set. Here is just the same URL that you would get from Steve to do in the viewer, but now you can do open the data set and then you start visualizing the data. And in this case, we're actually doing a time average, something that is often done for climate data. And just to give a sense of why this type of approach works well, is that on the left, in kind of the way we do the streaming, but here we're adding the time layer. On the left, we would have the traditional approach to do one thing at a time in order. And you see in this red line how slowly the error converges in doing traditional computation, while on the right column, this seems to kind of jump around in a more random way, but collects the data that actually makes the result converge much faster. And so if you want to achieve a certain level of error, for example, let me stop here. For example, this level of error, using our progressive approach, you would achieve that way sooner. And so in terms of doing analytics and processing, this really opened the door both in terms of spatial resolution and streaming and computation to accomplish scientific tasks much faster. So this is one example. And here you see the results and the end are the same. This is the result that was pre-computed before, just to show the comparison. The final results are the same. The convergence rate is much improved. Now moving on to dealing with three-dimensional data. So in a way, all this infrastructure, in some cases like NEON and so on, or agricultural applications with drone, it's 2D images, very large, stitched together and so on. We work also with neuroscience laboratories. You saw early on the material science case, where you have a pipeline that in some sense it's similar. You have your data source, in this case is a microscope instead of a airplane or a drone. We have a streaming component to put the data together. And for massive data sets also, this can be connected to a high performance computing environment so that you can do massive processing also in near real time, depending on the job system. And then even for something really, really large with many of those. So here, each of those blocks is in the order of like 64 gigabytes. And then you stitch them together and you get very quickly to large data collections. And this is, for example, watching in real time accessing the data. And so user, for example, will run a microscope for weeks, and without needing to sit there, they're able to do acquisition in real time, checking of the results. And with a web interface, they can check the results are accurate, but they will get an alert if something goes wrong. The visualization part also scales to various type of environments. We can go from laptops, iPads, and so on, but it can also scale to large firewall displays. And so even in that dimension, one would have a lot of flexibility. Effectively, each of those screens run one of the viewers, and they just have a mechanism to synchronize with each other. So each viewer stream a different portion of the data, and then they present a coherent image. So even if you rotate and so on. As a last aspect to highlight is also this has been used by neuroscience lab for labeling neurons and dendrites so that they can do a reconstruction of the circuitry in the brain. And in particular, we did this large amount of data, and the three-dimensionality of this process that can be manual, fully manual, or maybe semi-automated. We actually took advantage of embedding the technology in a virtual reality environment so that people can go in and trace the neurons. So this is a visualization of recent progress in this segmentation of all, first pre-segmentation of all possible paths in the brain, and then support from the user to identify which paths represent accurately the connection with different neurons, and that's how they would reconstruct the main circuitry in the brain. In particular here, the focus in the visual cortex, and the pre-computation here with topological tools allows to snap to the actual reconstruction with precision, even if one would go with a quick movement brushing through the data set. And so there is a combination of the streaming of the data. The virtual reality tools don't have a lot of memory yet, but given the way the technology works, it can work even on the lighter tools now that they don't use wires and so on. They're more comfortable, but of course they have more limited resources. The simplicity of deployment has helped us to also do very effective outreach in various communities. So in addition to kind of the use of the virtual reality in the lab, it was very easy to go into a museum of science. There's one here downtown in Salt Lake City. It's called the Leonardo. And we deployed temporarily our virtual reality environment. And then we have people go in and do the segmentation of the neurons. We kind of did a gamification of the approach so that they can do their own segmentation, and they would be scored in terms of how they do compared to neuroscientists. So in many cases, I think this outreach slash citizen science activities are very important. National Science Foundation and other agencies really care about it. And having the technology that is kind of lightweight and easy to deploy really helps in achieving those things very quickly without having a separate deployment process. And to conclude, a couple of examples of really larger data sets that we managed to deal with either in programmable or in visualization mode. This is a traditional data set called the visible human. Hopefully many of you are available, they know about it. And so this is a literally human that was frozen, and so he donated his body to science, was frozen and sliced, and then the object was, the shape was reconstructed by many images stacked on top of each other. The original alignment was kind of really poor, and you see kind of this jaggedy shape that doesn't make a spin anymore. And actually we use the same technology with small adjustment that we use for the stitching of the agricultural images to combine one slice and synchronize one slice to the next. And you see how one can now reconstruct very nicely the skin with all the tattoo and the information. And again, that's done kind of in a simple Python script. So we can not only share the data, but share the process that was used. And so people can do something equivalent or maybe even improve over this. One last example, I think it shows the scalability. So here I'm running this out on my laptop. This is a data set that is over 6 terabytes in space. So it's an electron microscopic image. It's the retina of a rabbit. And as you can see, even for a data set of this size, one can in real time visualize it fully in 3D, stream on the fly the part of the data that is needed. And so in the past, scientists could only do one slice at a time for this type of data. And so for the first time, without needing of any expensive resource, they were able to see the data in 3D and manipulate in real time without, again, having to have a big workstation with that much data and so on. Oh, and this is my backup video in case the connection failed. So overall, we have a set of capabilities that can be available for very simple and cheap deployment. The scalability is very good. We did with like terabytes, hundreds of terabytes, or even petabytes in a variety of data sets. We are focusing on Python support, but the core of the code is all C++. And so the reality is that if other languages are needed, the support can be added. But we have everything is available through this website, visus.org. And then those are the links to very specific cases. You will find all the code available. And just to give a sense, and this is the website. And so here we have various solutions, projects that we're working on, and so on. And I guess I'll stop here and see if anybody has questions. And I don't know if Steve, you wanted to run in the background also your demo.
I can.
So I'm opening the chat.
Questions?
Yeah, I'm opening the chat. I realize this now on Zoom things are a little bit awkward. So can people speak directly from the microphone, or they have to type the questions?
Well, they should be able to unmute themselves, and if not, we'll just do the chat.
Okay.
Either way will work.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, we'll give a little entertainment with teaching a bunch of images.
Yeah, so those are a few images that were collected from a drone that was going here on basically on a straight line. This is really a small example of the capability. And as you can see, so those are using, of course, the same technology. You can probably recognize the coarse to fine visualization when I zoom in. And if you see those tracks, where some train goes, hopefully, they are not really aligned correctly. So through our stitching process, which takes advantage of this data format in a matter of seconds for these images, but we have observed that it's in general a matter of a few seconds per image versus minutes for commercial other solutions that we have seen.
Yeah, it tends to scale fairly linearly, and most importantly, does not require much memory. Even for fairly large data collection, we can run this out of a laptop, and so that's very important to provide a inexpensive solution. So in a way, the overall software infrastructure really targets the use of inexpensive hardware components, and that's what can make it very attractive for people who have to do large deployments, but they don't want to invest in hardware, especially the hardware gets obsolete so fast.
Yes, I think that is finishing up. Let me, we have anything in the chat? Oh, there is something in the chat about the recordings. Okay.
Yeah, the recordings will be posted. It will take a week or two for them to process them, but they will be posted, and we'll email attendees where they can find those.
Yeah, so right now you can see that the images have been stitched well, and so there are not anymore those seam lines that we were seeing before.
Yeah. So you go from a collection of independent image to a single data product. And so as you can see now, you can do good segmentation, count elements, different type of analysis, similar to what the machine learning counting a tree was doing.
Yep. So,
okay. Any other questions for Valerio and Steve? Okay.
I don't have any questions. Again, thanks everybody for attending the session.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Valerio. Thank you, Steve.
thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.